Does it feel like currently in your life that you are working for money? What if I told you you can actually trick yourself into actually making money work for you?
Everybody has some form of aspirations of money, but if you still have the same mentality where you started from about what you understand about money, nothing will change.
Today's department, we have Will Roundtree, who is a 7-figure entrepreneur, business coach, real estate investor, and best-selling author.
There is a difference between making money and wealth. The easiest dollar to make is the one I don't have to work for.
If you are a wantrepreneur, chances are is you are trading time for money. And even though you are in control and you're the man or the woman, you're trapped.
I remember one time somebody asked me, Will, when did you know that you made it? And I had sat back and I thought about it. And I was like,
Will, thanks for being on the department. I always like to say the reason why I called it the department is because this is a space and place where I interview people who are killing it in their own department.
Absolutely. First of all, man, it's a pleasure. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. And
Definitely.
You're in the department of helping people make more money and build wealth, which I think it's one thing to like crack the code on doing that or figuring out what that looks like for certain people. And I want to talk about what that looks like. But like to get into the place where you help, you said thousands of people break and become 6-figure earners.
Absolutely.
And then at least a dozen, you've helped a dozen millionaires or people become millionaires.
Easily.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I love having conversations where I'm hyper curious about how to build wealth because I'm in the season. I think if I can unpack really quickly is I realize that if you can figure out how to make more money, like that's a great goal.
Definitely.
It's not bad. An internal desire to want to make more money is a good desire. Once you crack the code on feeling like you can create predictability in your income, if you need to make more, you can or whatever, then it's like what you do with the money is the actual game.
No. And I think that's where so many people get lost on this journey because there is a difference between making money and wealth. Because when you're making money, it's predicated solely off of you implementing, something that you can do, whether you're flipping cars, whether you're washing houses, whatever that case may be. But when it's wealth, it's an accumulation of assets. And I think there's such a divide of really understanding that because the term wealth has got a little bit muddy, I think, over the years.
Okay. Could you first define what is wealth to you and why has it become muddy?
So I'll say, and I always say the layman's, it's an accumulation of assets, meaning if I go and buy something and it pays me over time without me putting in actual, man hours or trading time for dollars, that is wealth because it's also an asset that is going to appreciate, which in turn is going to continuously pay me money or have an appreciated value that I could sell at a higher amount, whether that's through real estate, whether that's through art. That's why, some people like exotic watches, exotic cars, and different things of that nature. But to just go out there and say, hey, I'm going to go in and work really hard and make a bunch of money, that money is only predicated on if I do something, and the value only comes based upon what somebody is willing to pay me. And so I say it's gotten muddied because we've gotten into this chase the bag culture, and I got into entrepreneurship because I didn't want to work forever. I wanted to be able to build something that, as my mentor used to say, I want to be on the beach drinking out of a coconut while I'm making money. That's when you get to the part where you're really building wealth. And I like to find things that are going to pay me without me having to do a bunch of work behind it.
That's so good because it is funny how many people who start a business or start a side hustle and all you did was just employ yourself.
Oh, I always tell people when you think about an entrepreneur, and I started as an entrepreneur in 2003, you're really just trading time for dollars. Mm-hmm. One, because it's just you. If you don't work, you don't make money. Now, I'm a huge component of entrepreneurship, but we got to start learning how to graduate. And that's why we have to find things that we can implement that will pay us in spite of us. And this is where, you know, you start thinking about passive income and cash flow and all of these terms that we started to hear are buzzwords. But I think that a lot of people really don't know what they are. We're just like, get the bag, 6 figures and this and that and the third. But we have to understand that you will work forever if you don't have something that's going to pay you in spite of you.
Yeah. And just from my own personal journey, I started entrepreneurship in 2016.
Okay.
Had my first 7-figure year just last year.
Definitely.
It's been a gradual,
Welcome.
it was a
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a slow growth. Something I've learned is the more I'm learning, the more I'm making, I'm working less. And I know that's like, that could break people's minds, but I think if you are a wantrepreneur, chances are is you are trading time for money. And even though you are in control and you're the man or the woman, like great, but you're trapped.
I think I know why. Because people haven't learned how to delegate.
Mm.
You know, I often tell people that I would rather own 75% of my pie and pay out 25%.
Really good.
Because then I can go build another pie. But there are so many people who want 100% of the pie, and that's where they get trapped. Yep. They become the hamster on the wheel. And so I'm all for delegation. So I would rather go, like I remember reading a book by this, I think it was Russell Simmons, called Do Me, I believe. Don't butcher me on the title. But he talked about the fastest way to grow is joint ventures or partnerships or JVs. Joint ventures meaning, hey, you and I have we're in a similar wheelhouse. Let me partner with you and we can cross-pollinate our audiences and we can double our revenue. A lot of people don't do that. And so being able to offer, you know, other services within the wheelhouse. And so that's really how I grew my business so fast, is because I found industries within my wheelhouse that my clients needed those services. So most of the things that I offer to my clients and my audience, I kind of sell it almost like a franchise, but I don't want to use that term franchise. And I say it that way because it really is a one-stop shop. Mm-hmm. So when you come and work with me, when you're growing as an entrepreneur, as an investor, I have every single resource that you would need along the way without me having to, you know, exert the effort of me being that. And I think that's what so many entrepreneurs do. They want to be the marketer. They want to be the photographer. They want to be the spokesman. They want to be the cameraman. Like they're trying to do everything because they don't want to pay a percentage of their pie out. Yep. And I'll gladly give a percent away because the easiest dollar to make is the one I don't have to work for. So if I know you're good at something within my wheelhouse, I'd rather relinquish that to you and we bust that down, because now I can go and focus and create a whole nother, you know, revenue stream and bring somebody in to delegate that too.
Really good. And really, I mean, it is hard to separate yourself from like the 5 senses, because you can feel the money you're making. Definitely. It's tangible. And like you tap into creativity when you see money being made indirectly from a decision you made.
Well, I think not only that, which I 1,000% agree. Think about this, Omar. A lot of people, this is their first time where they've really made money. Mm. You know, if you had to think about, what do you think the average dollar amount that most people have probably touched?
Like most people, dollar amount? Wait, I mean like $1,000, $10,000.
Exactly. Yeah. So could you imagine you starting a business and then 1 month you make 10 grand? You get addicted to that.
Yeah, it breaks beliefs. It's like, what just happened?
You get addicted to that feeling. Yeah. And so now, you know, your ideology is, oh, I need to work harder. And so this whole chase the bag culture started. And I'm like, no, I'd rather build the bank than chase the bag, because you got to take the bags to the bank. And so I just, like you say, you start to learn how to work less but make more money. And I think that is really hard for people because of how we've been conditioned to work hard. Yep. And it goes against everything that we've been taught growing up.
Yeah, I think it's very important that when you hear a person preach the message of work hard, that you understand the context it's coming from. Right. And it could come from a wrong context, which is like, you need to sweat. You need to like put in late hours, because I believe we're in hard work. Definitely. and in doing good work, but I also believe in smart work. Let's work hard on smart things, right? So that it does create more ease for us to be more creative.
Right.
But that's how I hit, dude. Like, if I can attribute, because you're talking about, I don't even want to call it the cost of business, because I think like you can't escape the idea that like there are some things you're going to have to buy, whether that's software or hard tools
Right.
and supplies and things like that to make money. I mean, I got a space, you know, but it really it isn't the cost. It's the open door. Like I always want to make sure like when I'm going to the next level that it's not going to cost me anything.
Right.
It's actually an investment. And so the $1.2 million a year we had, it technically costed about $300,000. But right. I'll trade at 300 for $1 million any day.
Any day. And this is what I tell people. There's a cost of admission for success. And when we talked a little bit about this off camera, I'm big in understanding math. Even though I flunked algebra twice. Yeah. my teacher told me I wouldn't amount to anything. But I reverse engineer everything. If I know I can make a 1.2 million and it's going to cost me 300, my job is how fast can I get the 300,000 to go and deploy? Mm-hmm. And that's where so many people make a mistake at. They're like, oh, let me work harder. Let me go to more networking events. Let me post more free ads. You have to invest because there are going to be things that you're going to have to pay just to unlock to get to that next step or that next level. So I can remember there was a time where, you know, I made an investment into this particular community. And it was a community that you join to learn how to, you know, with your ads and different things of that nature. And it's not that I didn't know how to do this because I had been doing ads for several years, but I also understood the fundamental strategy of why I made that investment. It was the access I wanted. Mm-hmm. No different than a country club.
Right.
People pay for country club memberships for the access because there's somebody in there who can be the connector to your next investor, your next big deal, your next big opening. And so that's how I tricked myself into looking at it, is that anytime I make an investment into something, the investment may not come directly from Omar, but you may unlock the doors to somebody who I need to get access to. And that's where people need to really understand. Until you know that fundamental concept, you will always stay capped in your business.
Dude, you said a phrase that is the word picture is powerful. You got to trick yourself.
You do.
Because it won't feel good at first. You'll feel resistance at first.
Right.
But like that, like, well, yeah, would that have been the first time you invested in yourself and that was like a scary thing? Or
absolutely. Yeah. I'll tell you the very first major investment I made that wasn't tangible. I remember in 2014, I made an investment for a strategy call, and it was for $1,500 to talk to somebody. Yeah. This was scary in 2014. Yeah.
Like you're not getting anything tangible.
Nothing. Yeah. They're not sending me a PDF. Yeah. Like I get nothing. And so I remember speaking with the advisor, and I'm like, look, this is a lot of money. Again, this is 2014. And so he was like, yeah, you know, it's for $1,500 and, you know, giving me all of the data. And I'm like, man, I don't really have the money in my bank account, but I do have a credit card. And if I pay the consultation fee on the credit card, I only have to pay back like $100 a month. I'll do that. So I had to trick myself, but then I was like, I'm going to pull the value out of that call. And here's why I think a lot of people don't see the value in paying for consultation, because they don't know how to pull the value out of the call. I'm not going in saying, Omar, how can you help me?
Right.
I'm going in because I've already researched what it is that you're great at. I know where my gaps are at, and I'm going to ask you to help me to fill that gap based upon what your value is. It may be me asking you, hey, can you connect me to so-and-so? Hey, can you point me in the right direction? It's not that I need you to solve my problems. The consultation is for you to be able to help me close the gap. And I think that's where so many people have issues at. They're paying people thinking that it's going to solve their problem and give them that one magical thing. No, it's to help close the gap. But yeah, that's how I tricked myself that first time. I had to pay $1,500.
That's really good. And there's two things that I'm thinking about right now, because as we stack to go into like the vehicle you can use to really build wealth, it does, like, there is no better investment than the investment you make in yourself.
Absolutely.
However, I'm not putting a but there. I want to say however and comma. I want to say who you are when you receive the information is important as
Definitely.
well. It's like that could have been a waste if you weren't the person for the information.
Well, that's because I worked on myself before I got into entrepreneurship.
Boom.
I tell people often I had an unfair advantage. And my unfair advantage is I learned about personal development in 2005. So I read The Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read the Think and Grow Rich. I read The Richest Man in Babylon. I read How to Win Friends and Influence People going back into 2003, 2004, 2000. So I was becoming before I wanted to become. So it wasn't that, oh, if I pay you this money, Omar, I better be rich. And that's the mentality so many people have, where it's, no, I know what I want out of that call. So any business venture or any investment I make, I'm not doing it with the hopes of that one thing or that singular investment being the catalyst of getting me to, 10 million. I'm making that investment knowing that that is the link to get to the next part of the tree.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
The Roundtree.
The Roundtree. I like that.
Okay. Those books that you just listed,
Definitely.
Which are just books that everyone should
Prerequisites.
read. Yeah. Can you just pull out like the top 3 things that you saw woven through the best-selling money books?
Always say it's not even money books, Omar. I think it's more changing your perspective books, because everybody has some form of aspirations of money, and you could read a ton of money books. But if you still have the same mentality of where you started from about what you understand about money, nothing will change. And so what I would say is that the biggest lesson that I think I've gotten, is that I have to change the way I think. And then Jim Rohn used to say, when you change the way you think, that's when you'll become successful. And I didn't understand what he meant by that back in like 03, 04, 05. But as I started to grow on this journey, I now understand that everything that our parents taught us about money was a lie. Everything that our teachers taught us, our counselors, our pastor, like everything that we've been taught was not the way things are now. And that, the way that life, progresses, we're operating off of outdated information. So we have to be able to think, but we think that thinking is something that's inverted. We think thinking is sitting here trying to figure something out. Thinking is about knowing how to make sound decisions. So when you give me some data, I'm going to take that data and figure out what's fact and what's truth. Truth meaning, hey, it's documented. Fact meaning that's your reality. So once I decipher that, then I'm going to be able to make a decision on moving forward or going left or going right. That's what those books taught me, how to think differently. Yeah, then it taught me about concepts. When I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I understood, I didn't understand it back then, what the cash flow quadrant was, the employee quadrant, the self-employed, the business, and then the investor. The goal is to get to the investor, because that's where you play at a higher level, where you're mitigating your taxes, you're leveraging debt. You don't pay taxes on debt. I'm not working for the dollar. I'm borrowing to make money. And so once you start to understand concepts, your life changes. And so, but you have to think differently before you even get there.
Yep.
So that's what those books taught me.
It's really good. When did you feel like you stepped into investor? Like, what was that?
Man, when I made my first investment, so let me rewind. So my very first investment, I actually invested in a tax franchise that failed horribly.
like a small business. You invested in a small business.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started a small business. It was a tax franchise where we filed taxes for people. And it wasn't one of the major franchises. It was a gentleman who started a franchise, and the franchise paperwork probably wasn't even correct. And so I applied for it. I liquidated my 401k. I quit my 9 to 5. And at this time, I was making, what would be deemed to be, good money. I was making, I think, top line $103,000 a year. But I was so vested in being an entrepreneur, just so I can say I'm a full-time business owner. I quit, started my tax franchise, and it failed horribly. But it wasn't because I didn't know what I was doing. It was actually because the franchise was not a legitimate business, and he was siphoning money from us. And to this day, he's actually serving 40 years in federal prison.
Whoa.
Because the FBI found out what he was doing and just a bunch of the erroneous things. But I lost everything. This was the second time I was, close to being homeless, which, moving to Las Vegas, I actually moved out here and I became homeless. But a lot of people, that would have taken them out, because at the time, I had a family, kids, mortgage. I had every bill you could think of. But it was a couple things that set me up to where I wasn't able to fold, Omar. The first thing was my expenses were always low. Even though I was working and making, what they call good money, I never spent over an exceeded amount of my, revenue that was coming in from my 9 to 5. One of the biggest mistakes for most up and coming entrepreneurs, their personal expenses are too high. And so I have this thing where I say, do you know your number? And what I mean by that is that, yeah, the jobs say you make 50,000, but that's not what goes through your bank account. But you're deducting your lifestyle based off of how much, usually 50,000. So that's the first thing that put me in a position where I didn't fold completely. The second thing was I had a different mindset. I was like, oh, this failed, but what am I going to learn from this? And I'll tell you what I learned from that, Omar. I did it solely for the money. I didn't put any concepts in place, no checks and balances. I was just chasing the bag. And I'm not saying that's the ultimate reason. Obviously, it was a bad business deal, but I would have never done it if I would have done my due diligence and went slow. I did it just because they were like, oh, you can make a lot of money in the tax industry. Everyone has to file taxes. And of course, it would have been predicated on me doing most of the work. And so after I lost that investment, I actually got depressed for about 6 months. And I remember just going back to what I knew, and that was, my personal development. And I really had to build myself back up mentally. So when I talk about when you change the way you're thinking, that's when you'll become successful. It's also, you are going to go through pitfalls.
Yep.
And the way you think is what's going to help you get out of that. It's not a guru. It's not another, like, sometimes you have to trick yourself. You have to be so delusional of yourself and your abilities and who you are and your beliefs and your faith. That's what gets you through those, those downpours of being an entrepreneur.
Dude, I find a pattern with successful people that they all have that thing that happened to them.
Right.
But it didn't like define them. I invested $100,000 into a Ponzi scheme. Obviously I didn't know it was a Ponzi scheme at the moment. I had friends who were in it. It was just like a community based thing. And then like the rug was ripped out under, I think, over 300 investors' feet.
Wow.
And they just ran with the money. And I don't care who you are. $100,000 is a lot of money.
Hurts.
Yeah. And
hurts.
I don't know what it was. And I think part of it is I live a generous life. I trust God with the tithe. I give offerings. I fund the kingdom of God. That's kind of like why I'm in business.
100%.
But there was the moment where it was like, first it was the voice that was like, what a terrible steward you are. Like I had to deal with that. And then the next phase of that is like the comeback's going to be bigger than the thing that happened to me. So So then it was like, all right, I'm just going to learn how to make money faster. So that's when like Myron says, I'll help you make $100,000 in a day. I'm like,
Right.
well, I lost $100,000 in a day.
So it's possible to make it in a day.
Long story short, I think that is like when something happens to you,
Definitely,
you know, you can use it as leverage.
Well, I often say that failure is data.
Yep.
And
Failure is feedback.
It is. And I think so many people use failure as a woe, it's me. This is what I tell people. I would not be here today if that tax business hadn't failed.
Right.
I would still be in there trying to make money because tax season is only 10 weeks. So I would have been in that business every single year trying to just keep the doors open because I had a 3,000 square foot office. My rent was $3,500 a month. So every year I had to make sure I made at least $60,000 just to cover the rent and the utility. So I tell people sometimes that's God's way of saying that that's not for you. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand that everything isn't going to be for us.
Yep.
So yeah.
And experiences that get you to really believe that money is just money.
That's it.
It's like money has like for me to be able to lose $100,000 like that, the value of money just got even lower. It got to a pit level, which is why now I'm numb to even the income. Like it doesn't matter. Like
I 1,000% agree. Let me give you another viewpoint.
Yeah.
I remember one time somebody asked me, Will, when did you know that you made it? And I had sat back and I thought about it. And I was like, so I remember in 2020, I made an investment of like 50,000 and I lost it all. And it didn't hurt. I was like, that's when I made it. When you can make an investment and you just keep going. So when you talk about it being a numbing factor, not in a disrespectful way, but the factor that like you're going to win some and you're going to lose some, no matter how successful you get.
Yep.
But you just got to keep pressing on because you believe in you. And that was my defining moment.
That's good. Yeah, man. Cause I feel like even for the believer,
correct.
Sometimes if you value money so high, it's like you're praying for more of it. Or even there's a season where I would pray to give it, like, but it's like God always wants us to give it.
Definitely.
And now when I hear when a couple comes to me and they're like, tell me they're planning a church or what, I don't even have to pray to give. It is a cool place to be in, but it's also the journey has, you know, it's just that like the quicker you can get to the place where you realize like money is just money.
Definitely.
And something I heard was, you know, money is a God when you have less of it, if it's consuming you. Because people think rich people, money is a master when people are rich. But it's like, no, money's a master when you don't have it. Yeah. Because then you're controlled by the lack of it.
You do everything you can to jeopardize your integrity to make it.
Right.
And yeah.
Good. So I want to back up a little bit because you talked about how delegation in the season of earning is imperative.
Absolutely.
Just like a legit question that just came to my mind is, how do you delegate and not feel bad about doing it?
I guess when you failed so much at things that you know you're not good at, it's easy. And that's the thing that I had to learn, that I don't have to be great at everything. So it's easier for me to delegate. And you have to get to the point where you don't have an ego. And I think that's why it's hard for some people to delegate, because I've been in situations where I've, worked and partnered with individuals where their ego took them out. And so when it comes to delegating, I never feel bad. I want to get someone who's better than me at what they're great at.
That's good.
Because I don't work with people to babysit them.
Yeah, because I think that question came from that place.
Yeah.
It's like where I feel like the delegation means hiring somebody to do something that I don't want to do anymore. And so like, I'll just pay him like a very small amount of money,
right.
Like that. But when you see it from a place of like, no, you tell me what to do.
You tell me what to do. Yeah. And it's interesting you use that terminology. I was speaking with one of my PR team the other day, and they were like, so Will, and they were working on like my updated branding pitch and everything. It was like, so what do you think, Will? I'm like, you guys are the experts. If you guys think it's great, that's what I'm going with. Now, of course, there's some things that I would change from like nuances, like they used William instead of Willie because people always think my name is William. But outside of that, no, it's like, no, if I hire you for what you tell me you're great at, I'm going to trust in you to do that until you show me that you can't. Because, and here's why I do that, Omar. And a lot of people say, Will, why do you give people that level of grace? Because once they've shown me multiple times they can't, they have no chance of coming back from that. I'm going to let you go so far out there so you can show me what it is that you say you can really do. Because now when it comes time for you saying, hey, Will, can I get a raise or can I get more money? You're going to let me know what that value stake is in your work ethic and how you deliver and your promptness. I'm not going to bug you and say, hey, where's it at? Are you done? How long is it going to take? No, I'll allow you to show me who you really are.
Yeah. You know, it's a pattern that I see in my journey is I'm very obsessive about my craft.
Definitely.
I'm good at what I do, not because I'm necessarily gifted, but because I worked on it.
Definitely.
And I just feel like I get the short end of the stick with other people because they're not great at what they do.
You're going to get that a lot though.
Yeah. I just don't, I have to let like the disappointment of that, like not be, I don't know. It's just something, but I just want to encourage, like, get really good. Like if you're charging people money for your services, like just be good at what you do.
Get great at it because people will pay you a lot of money.
Yes.
And that's the thing I tell people. I'm saying, you want to make a lot of money, get great at what you're great at.
Yep.
Because there is somebody right now who's willing to pay to take that headache off of their plate. Right. This is why personal assistants for like high net worth earners make so much money, because their promptness, they learn who that person is. They don't have to ask, hey, Omar, what do you want for lunch? Before you wrap up, the lunch is ready by the time this taping is over. You have to get that great at what it is that you say that you're presenting to the world or your offer or your service. And people will pay you a very, large lump sum of money to handle a convenience for them. People pay for convenience all the time.
Hey, department fam, wanted to take a brief break from this conversation. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is that, did you know that 75% of the people that watch this podcast on YouTube actually aren't subscribed, which is a high chance that you're not subscribed. So number one, I want to say thank you for listening or watching the podcast. And number two, if you can hit that subscribe button, that would be amazing. The second thing is, if you are an entrepreneur, content creator, or somebody looking to make money online, I want to encourage you to come to this online event called the Content to Cash Challenge. This is a special 5-day event that's going to give you access to the system I use in my business to make multiple 6 figures with my content. If you've been desiring to either get your business and brand more exposure, grow a YouTube channel, whatever it is when it comes to video, I would encourage you to jump into the Content to Cash Challenge. We'll be sure to post the link to the challenge down in the show notes or the description. And I want to encourage you to jump into the VIP experience. This will give you access to a 1-hour Q&A call every day of the challenge. This will guarantee myself to answer a personalized question you may have. So I'll see you on the Content to Cash Challenge. Now let's jump back into the conversation. I like to say, when it comes to like hard work really hard at making somebody else's life easier.
Oh man.
And like money will just flow.
You'll make just as much money as them.
Yeah. Yeah, facts.
Literally. So
yeah. Okay, so something I've found with wealth building is, like you mentioned, keeping your expenses low, also probably categorized as having delayed gratification.
Definitely.
I feel like it's so hard to get past the step of getting it out your system. And what I mean by that is, like, I want to know your take on it. Like,
Definitely.
Should you go like buy the watches, buy the car, get the house, get it out your system?
Definitely.
Or is there a something that you can, like, hey, you don't have to learn by experience when it comes to that?
See, my journey was so different because, like, with a lot of this new wave of entrepreneurship culture is different. And I get that. And I always say, and I say this in the most respectful way, like, sometimes you got to have the costume, because people won't buy from you if they don't think you're not successful, unfortunately. Right. But I also think that there's a whole segment of people who they just want to know that you're great at what you're great at.
Yep.
So it's such a fine line. Now, I can say for my journey, I didn't do any of that. I mean, I didn't spend any money for like 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
But it was because of where I came from. You know, I was like, I had, you know, moved to Las Vegas in 2005. I had $500 to my name. Obviously, that doesn't get you far. I had no family, no friends. I knew no one out here. Ended up sleeping in my car, you know, and that's kind of how I got really great at saying, you know what, I'm going to focus on this thing called entrepreneurship, but I always had a job in between, made the other investment into the franchise, lost that. So I didn't want to be in a position where I lost again on trappings, because I see that happen a lot.
Yep.
And it's because, you know, so many people really don't understand the illusion of money, meaning you're going to have down months, no matter how successful you are. Because you can make I know 7-figure earners who within that 12 months had months where they made nothing. Yep. Because month 7, you can have a $300,000 month. And so the illusion of how money works for so many people is still so new that you have to be very careful. Now, if you want to play the game and have the cars, the watches, you don't have to get the 2025. Get a 2020. So there's ways of doing it. Rent the cars. Like, I'll give you a prime example, Omar. When I first got really serious about business, I never had an office space. And I know that's one of the first expenses most, you know, entrepreneurs want to get. But here's the thing that I learned. Let's say you get an office space and it's $5,000. You're brand new in business. That's $60,000 a year that you're committed to, no matter how good or bad your business does. And so what I would do is I rented a virtual suite. This was like in 2012. I rented a virtual suite, and I was able to hang my name on the, you know, what they call it, where you walk into the office and you see all of the business name. So for $99, I could put my name there. So if people came there, they saw my business name. And if I had an appointment, I would rent the office for the day. It was like $15 a day. Wow. And if I had several clients, I would rent the conference room. It was $25 an hour. People didn't know the difference. And so I didn't commit myself to having a $2,000 rent payment every single month, because my revenue wasn't even consistent enough for me to commit myself to that. So I think that there's ways of showing signs of that you're thriving in business. But at the end of the day, people just want to know that you can deliver. Yep. That's really, you know, my point of view is, and now with it being like a technology base, you don't even have to see the clients. Mm-hmm. So you don't need all of those trappings. Yep. If you want to go do a video shoot or whatever, look, just rent it if that's what you choose to do. But really I personally don't think you have to do that these days.
Good. So you have used the money you've made in business to build real estate portfolios.
I use the concept of how I make money.
Okay, clean that up for me.
Because I didn't necessarily use my revenue from my business to buy real estate.
Okay.
Because that would be me robbing Peter to pay Paul. I built my business and I used that revenue to put back into my business. I leveraged the bank's money to buy real estate. Yeah.
Okay. And when you say that, because like I know like there's like a marketing way of saying that, Definitely. But like are you insinuating that like there's still the cost of the down payment and stuff?
Definitely.
But you're saying like you're not taking large sums of money to invest in real estate.
Right. So I'll give you a breakdown and then I'll tell it in a
help me build my real estate empire.
Absolutely.
Let's go.
Okay. So here's one of the fundamental things that I said why it took me so long to get into real estate. Because I actually grew up around real estate, but I didn't know it until I was in my 30s. My grandfather had a 5th grade education, but he had over 45 houses and 2 car washes.
Dang.
And in 2002, 2003, he actually tried to give me his real estate portfolio, and I turned it down.
Wow.
Because I knew nothing about business, real estate, and because all of the houses were in the hood And so I was like, I don't want those raggedy houses. And now that portfolio would be worth a few $1,000,000 because all of them are in gentrified neighborhoods.
Wow.
And I'm sure he probably paid less than $10,000 for most of those houses. And so as I, got into entrepreneurship and started learning about wealth building and real estate and just all of these different concepts, here's a fundamental thing that I sing with a lot of investors or people wanting to become investors. And I'm not saying this is the only way that you get into real estate. It's a way. How long do you think it would take someone to save, let's say, $25,000, the average person?
3 years, a couple years.
It would probably take longer than that. Because think about it. If most people are living at the tilt of their budget, how can you save?
That's true.
So for so many people, financially, it's almost impossible. And so then you're taking money from your savings to go and buy an asset that I think so many people get into real estate thinking that it's going to make them rich right away. Real estate is your retirement plan. That's what I tell myself. And so I didn't want to take money from my business because I needed the revenue from my business to put back into my business so my business can grow, so I can hire more people, so I can invest more in ads, so I can do the things that's going to help that business continue to grow. And so I remember watching a YouTube video with Robert Kiyosaki, who's a Rich Dad Poor Dad author. And he said something that blew my mind. He said, I was looking to get into real estate and there was a property that was $20,000 and I needed 20,000 down. 20% down. And I didn't have the cash, but I used a credit card. And he used the credit card to buy the property or the down payment. And the rents would service the mortgage and the credit card payment, and he was left with like $25 left over. Now, someone who doesn't understand how money and wealth and all of that works will hear $25, that ain't no money. But we don't buy the real estate necessarily for the revenue. We buy it for the value. Mm. And so when I heard that, I said, I need to learn how he did that. So I started, researching online, and I was like, oh, he didn't buy the property cash with the credit card. He used the money off the credit card for what we call the soft cost, which is the down payment, appraisal, home inspection, and whatever other fees that lead up to getting the deal. And the bank will finance 80% of the acquisition. So all I have to do is bring 20% to the table and I can get it from the bank. Oh, I don't have to save the 20%. And so once I saw that was a viable strategy, off. And so I tested it. So in 2015, 2016, there was a property. This one we were able to get properties like 20, 30,000 all in. Mm. So I found a property in Cleveland, Ohio, $25,000, and it was already cash flowing, which means it was a tenant in place already at like $975 a month. Okay. And so that particular property we did pay cash for because the bank wouldn't finance $25,000, not under your LLC, because I don't put properties in my personal name. I only put them under my companies. And so once I calculated, okay, the credit card is going to be at 0% interest, which means I only got to pay on $25,000. It's going to cost me, worst case scenario, $300. The property is already making $975 a month. So the rents will cover the debt. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's a no-brainer. So I was able to liquidate the cash off the card, wired the money to the title company. The title company, deemed me as now the owner. I'm making money. I'm using the rents to pay the credit card. And then I'm noticing, wow, this really works. So then about a year later, the property increases in value. I'm like, oh, wow, I paid $25,000. The property is now worth $52,000. And because here's what I learned too, Omar, just because I paid a certain price point for the property, that doesn't mean that's what it's worth. It's going to be worth based upon what the value of the neighborhood is growing at.
Right.
And so a year later, the property's worth $52,000, which means I can go and now borrow money, or the equity, which means the money that is now the value of that property. I can borrow money from that property tax free. What? Think about if you made your 1.3 million tax free.
Crazy.
Crazy. So I could borrow up to 80% of that 50 something thousand. So I pulled out 40 something thousand tax free, paid the $25,000 off, and I was able to keep the rest. And guess who was covering the new mortgage payment? Still the tenants. And I said, wow, I wonder how many times I can do this. So I said, I'm just going to go and try to get as much credit as I can and go buy as much real estate as I can. And it just kept working because it's really just math. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of how that process started for me.
Yeah, that's fire. Something that comes to mind. Okay, so house is 25. Let's just, for easy numbers, doubles in a year or so to 50.
Which that's not always the case. Yeah, I want to point that out.
And you financed out of that, so you paid back essentially the 25-ish.
Correct.
And then you had like 25 in your pocket. But like, wouldn't that monthly payment be higher because you took it out?
Great question.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it becomes cheaper. And here's why. And this is why we have to understand how money works and the cost of money. So look, before I answer that question, I have what I call my 4-step Roundtree methodology. Number 1 is we got to change somebody's mindset about money, work, all of that stuff. Number 2, understanding credit. Number 3, financing and the cost of money. And then number 4, asset building. Okay. So when you borrow money against the equity of your property, I'm borrowing that money on a 30-year term at a fixed interest rate at 6%. That's very cheap money. So if we calculate it, which, we can calculate it at some point if they really want to know the numbers, but to borrow $40,000 over 30 years at a 6% interest, you're talking like $200.
Okay.
So no, the payment doesn't increase. See, and that's why we have to understand the terms of the money. Like here's where I see a lot of entrepreneurs get in trouble when they're leveraging credit. They'll go out and borrow money on a short-term basis. So I've seen people go and borrow $30,000 on an 18-month term. Okay. But then there's at a 79% interest rate. So you're looking at a $15,000 a month payment. And my numbers are completely off. I'm just giving an example of some scenarios I've seen versus borrowing 30, 40, 50,000 on a 30-year term at a 6% interest rate. You're looking at a $200 to $300 payment. So that one fundamental, concept of understanding the cost of money has either made people a lot of money or it's broken them in their businesses. And I see it all the time.
That's good. Yeah. And I think the reason why here's what my brain is doing. Definitely. Selfishly, I have a house that I refinanced in 2020. So it has like a 2.25 interest rate, and it's almost double the value. Bought the house for like 300. I think we owe like 280, maybe 260, but it's worth a little over 5. And there's something in me that's like, that isn't it. Do not touch that interest rate. And then, we recently bought a house at a 6.5 interest rate. Right. And it's just like the thing in my mind is, to me, it doesn't make sense to pull out the money and just like go start doing some stuff. I
definitely wouldn't touch the interest rate.
Yeah.
But you could do a HELOC.
Okay.
A home equity line of credit. Because the reason I don't like doing refinances on my primary mortgage, because now you restart the 30 years over.
Right.
And your rate is going to go up. You'll never see 2% again.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
Like, we're lucky. We got, even the home I live in, I think it's a 3%. And so, but yeah, I always tell people your primary home, always HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. But then you got to make sure you use that HELOC to go make you some money.
Right.
Your investment properties, you refinance or do what's called a cash out refinance. Obviously, the goal is to be able to put that money to work for you. But it also, you also can keep some. And I have this thing, Omar, where I say the $1 million real estate portfolio goal. And let me share that with you real quickly. So I always tell people the goal is to build $1 million in real estate assets. Okay. So when you think about going to college, someone who goes to college is going to take them, average 4 years, maybe 10, depending on the level of degree. And here's where I came up with this concept. Per the Department of Education, the average lifetime earnings for someone with a bachelor's degree, and my numbers may be a little bit off, but they can go to the Department of Education to look this up. The average lifetime earnings, and when you think about lifetime earnings, how many years is that?
Lifetime, like working lifetime?
Yes.
I don't know, like 40 years.
40 years. The average lifetime earnings of someone with a bachelor's degree is 1.6 million.
Dang.
And when you break that down, it sounds like a lot. That's like $40,000 a year.
Right.
So now imagine if you built a real estate portfolio over 4 to 6 years and built $1 million real estate portfolio, meaning you have $1 million in assets, whether you bought 10 properties at $100,000 a piece, 2 properties at $500,000, whatever the case may be. And at year 10, there's at least $500,000 of equity in there. Okay. Here's what you can do. You can pull out $500,000 tax free, because you don't have to pull out the whole 80%. You can pull out 50% of the loan to value ratio. Mm-hmm. So let's say you put out $500,000. Do you know how much $500,000 will cost you over 30 years? And I'm going to take worst case scenario, 9% interest.
Or a little bit.
If you have to take a guess.
$500,000 at 9%.
9% over 30 years.
30 years.
And I'm not looking for you to get
maybe
it right.
$5,000 a month.
Pretty close. It's about $4,300 to $4,700 a month. Now think about that. That's very cheap money.
Yeah.
Now, here's why I break this down. Do you think that most people's expenses are more or less than about $4,300 a month?
Probably a little more.
Probably a little more. So here's what I tell people we're going to do. So we're going to take that $500,000 and we're going to use a portion of that to pay off all your personal living expenses. So let's just say for yourself, your mortgage on the first property and everything else, let's say it's $300,000. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now you still have $200 left. You're going to take $100, go buy more real estate, because $100,000 will get you, will give you $500,000 in purchasing power. And then you and your family, you're going to keep $100, going to blow it, do whatever you want with it. Okay. So now took $500,000. It's going to cost you $4,700 a month, which is probably less than your personal expenses now. Mm-hmm. And guess who's going to cover that $4,700 a month?
The $100K?
The rents.
Oh, the rents from the thing.
From the original portfolio.
Yeah.
Now, you just saw how to get access to $500,000. But yet, with a bachelor's degree, the average lifetime earnings is 1.6 million.
Wow.
We have to learn concepts. We have to learn the cost of money. We have to learn how to become the hedge fund, which the investors are my banks. I'm not necessarily raising money from individuals. I go to the banks because I know as long as I use their money and pay them back, they want to give me more.
Right.
But then I don't abuse the money. I use the money to go make me more money. And then I use the money from the portfolio and all of that to fund my lifestyle. I don't live off of my business revenues.
Yeah.
I live off of the assets.
Hey, question for you. Are you somebody who is looking to start creating content, or maybe you currently create content, but all the gear and the tech just overwhelms you? If so, I wanted to let you know about our sponsor for this podcast, Ulanzi. Whether you're creating content with your smartphone, a camera, or just trying to take your Zoom calls to the next level, Ulanzi has everything you need to make your setup look and sound professional. I've been using their gear myself, and honestly, it's been a complete game changer for my content. You can check them out at ulanzi.com/Omar, and we've got some amazing picks for you. And also, if you look at the description below, we have a special promo code that will give you 12% off your entire order. Big thanks to Ulanzi for sponsoring this episode and helping us create. Good. I think something that is making it appear as difficult for me is I live in Las Vegas, and I bought my first home here in 2013.
Correct.
For $140,000. The down payment on our newest house was $150,000.
Right, easily.
And And you mentioned when before we filmed that like, you go middle America.
Absolutely.
And I think because I'm not actively looking, and I'm not aware. I've never even been to middle America other than Texas.
Right.
Like, yeah, how do you walk me through, how do you start investing in real estate outside of the state you live in?
Okay. So I'll talk to you as if you're someone who's working with me.
Okay.
And then I'll give you my point of view. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to say, Omar, we're going to look at this as a business.
Yep.
We have to remove the emotion out of it, because I think most people go into real estate as an emotional feeling. Oh, I love this house.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to remove that. And so I often tell people, most of my property, and I'm not saying this is how everybody does real estate. Most of my properties I've never seen. Mm-hmm. But I do that because I can remove the emotion.
Right.
Okay. So when I'm buying, it's a mathematical equation. And here's what I mean. Okay, we're going to go look in middle of America. And I usually tell people, and there's some people who are against this strategy, but I tell people, look, you got to find the strategy that works for you,
yep.
you know? And so this strategy worked for me. I find properties that are $100,000 to $150,000. That's how I started my initial strategy. And that's what I would do with someone who's brand new. And it's a couple reasons why. One, your barrier of entry is lower, meaning for every 100,000, using a commercial debt service coverage ratio loan, which is a loan that doesn't calculate your debt to income ratio.
Wow.
It calculates the debt servicing from the property, meaning if the mortgage is 1,000, if the rent, as long as the rent is at least 1,000, they'll give you the loan. They don't care about your credit. They don't care about your income, no tax returns, nothing.
Wow.
So it's easier to scale. So we're going to go find properties that are $100,000. You only need $25,000 on a $100,000 loan at a 7 to 8% interest. Let's say worst case scenario, 9%. We know that the mortgage is going to be about $700. The average rent in North America, what would you guess that it is?
North America, probably like average.
Yes.
$1,400.
$1,500, which means every single property at $100,000 with a $700 mortgage, I'm going to make at least how much a month? $1,500. Mathematically, that deal will always cash flow.
Yeah.
So I don't have to think about that. And so that's how I get my new clients to understand that it's a mathematical equation. And as long as that property cash flows, all we're going to do is figure out how to expedite getting $1 million real estate portfolio, even if you only stuck with $100,000 properties. But then eventually the properties appreciate, you borrow the money. Now you go get the 4-family. Properties appreciate, borrow. Now you go get the 8-unit. Now you go get the 10-unit. And you just keep recycling the money and you never use your own money. So the way I help a lot of my clients understand it is I have them to look at it as a business. So because now you're probably thinking like, well, how do I manage it? How do I do this? Right. I have what I call my real estate A team. I'm going to help you to go vet out a realtor in the local market. So now you have boots on the ground, but we're going to make sure it's an investor friendly realtor, not just a realtor who sells homes. They have to solely understand the mind of an investor,
right? Because
they're never going to bring you anything above or at market value. Right. We only want things below market value. Secondly, we're going to find a property manager. That is the glue to your real estate business. They're your eyes and ears. You don't want to get a call while you're at Disney with your family about a toilet. You want your property manager to handle that. They do the vetting of the tenants. They do the sourcing of the handyman. If you ever need a contractor, they're going to source the contractor. You don't have time to be flying back and forth to middle of America trying to source contractors, because they will take advantage of you if they know you're not there. You're going to find a good home inspector. This is the person who is going to inspect the property before you even make a decision on if you're going to buy it or not. You're going to have a great lender. Make sure you get the best rates, get the best terms. They're in your best. Make sure they're a lender that works with investors, because they're not going to put you in a bad deal. And that's the other reason why I like debt service coverage ratio loans, or which is commonly referred as DSCR loans, because they won't finance a bad deal. If the deal doesn't debt service, they won't finance it. And so now we've figured out the price point you'll get in. We know that they'll always cash flow. We're going to build your real estate A team. And so now all you have to do is focus on scale. Now, here's the other thing that I like about that price point as a new investor, not necessarily as a seasoned. Let's say life happens, because things can happen and, everything falls from up under you. It's easier to sell a property at 100,000 than $500,000. Why? Because the barrier of entry for consumers is a lot lower.
Yeah.
What do you think the pool is wider for people who can afford 100,000 or $500,000?
Right. It's bigger.
So if something happened where I had to get liquid, it's easier to sell my portfolio or the property, or I can borrow against it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I
good.
teach someone to kind of look at it and evaluate it. I showed them how to build it as a business. I showed them how to delegate, and you don't pay any of those people unless you get paid.
Right.
So it's not like you're paying them up front. You don't pay the realtor up front. You don't pay the property manager up front. You do pay the home inspector, but he's going to protect you and probably help you get the property cheaper. So there's different things and strategies that I show, my clients on how to do so. I mean, 90% of my community don't live in the state where they buy their first investment. And when they buy, it's such a confident investment because I taught them how to do it the right way. I mean, I have a 23-year-old out of Los Angeles, California, discharged from the military, had no job, and we've helped him and his father combined. They've gotten 6 properties in less than 18 months.
Wow.
With this strategy. Yeah.
Really good. Like they got 6 properties. What would be their cash flow, understanding that it's rental and it's probably not that much, especially if they're using, services like property management companies? Like, what are they making on those 6 properties?
I never asked because I'm not that in depth with them, just because my community is a lot larger. But I can say he still isn't working, and the 23-year-old recently just got his first apartment in downtown Los Angeles.
Fire. He
got a car. So I mean, he's doing something right, clearly. Yeah. But often tell people that even if, because here's the thing, and let me ask you a question before I answer that. What would you think that the average dollar amount from an emergency standpoint impacts families? At what dollar amount is a financial emergency for most families?
Most families, $1,000,
$500 to $1,000. So if I help someone who's never owned anything get investment properties where they're making an extra $500 to $1,000, do you think that changes a household?
100.
So I never go in saying, hey, I'm going to make you the next Robert Kiyosaki. I'm never going in saying I'm going to make you a millionaire. I don't even utilize that terminology. I'm saying, hey, let me help you to increase your net worth by a minimum of $100,000 and get your first property in 12 months. Because I also know per Vanguard that after working 40 years, most people, or the cap that most people should have in a 401k is $242,000. That's after working 40 years. The median is 88,000. So if I help you get one investment property that's going to pay you forever, and the value starts at 100, which may eventually get to 250,000 by the time you get to the age of retirement, you're in the top 3% of wealth earners.
Yep. So good.
So that's what I do, is showing people, not saying, hey, let me help you to be a millionaire, but let me help stabilize your household financially. Because that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Because you'll never be a millionaire if you can't get stable.
Right. It's really good. And obviously it's the long game.
It's a long game, man.
Yeah. I think there is that on my personal journey is the that delayed gratification thing.
Definitely.
Like in my mind, I'm like, okay, what's the fastest path to 150K passive? And I realize that it's about $3 million invested at a 4% return.
It's a mathematical equation.
Yeah.
Man.
And so my thing is just like, usually it's kind of where to deploy.
Definitely.
And it sounds like there's still so much opportunity in the US to build a real estate portfolio in a short amount of time.
Well, not only that, here's the other thing, because there's a lot of people who are against leveraging debt. And I'm okay with
Sure.
whatever strategy.
It's because
works
most
for
people
you.
suck with money. That's why.
That's the point.
Right.
I tell people, find me somebody who hates credit. They probably blow their paycheck too.
Yeah. Right.
It usually coincides. But here's the thing. In a lot of these countries that we love to go and visit, they don't have a debt system. So people have aspirations of going to live in the DR and Mexico and all of these countries. If you're not making American money, you live like how it feels to live in their communities. It doesn't stretch. You can't leverage credit or debt out there if you're a citizen of those countries. And so I tell people, as long as, and I think I heard, several huge real estate, people like the Grant Cardones and the Robert Kidd, like, I'll borrow $3 million because I know I can deploy it and put it out there, and it's going to make me, $40,000, $50,000 a month.
Yep.
And as long as it services the debt without me having to work, that portfolio or that investment I'm buying is always going to constantly appreciate. And because here's the thing that I look at, and I always say, follow the money. What are all of the major commercial investment firms doing right now? They're buying up real estate.
Right.
Why? Because that's the commodity of North America. Why do you think they'll never let the housing market crash? That's what holds up our economy. Why are banks in position to finance mortgages? What is one of banks' biggest assets? Real estate. That's why they will always lend money to me or you or whoever when they own real estate assets. And so I tell people, for every $100 you put in the bank will pay you interest on 10% of that. The other 90%, they loan to people like me. So I tell people, I make more money off of your bank. I make more money off of your money in the bank than you make off of it.
Mm.
And we have to start to understand that it's really just a tool.
Right.
Money is a tool. Like you say, once you learn not to worship and chasing the bag, you make more of it. Same thing. I think because we have such a bad notion of credit, and it's been deemed evil and all of these different things, but credit doesn't have feelings. Right. It doesn't tell you spend me. It really is just a tool. And because we haven't become disciplined enough, because going back to most people have only maybe touched $1,000. When you see you have a line of credit for $100,000, you have to be very disciplined.
Right.
And that's hard for a lot of people.
Dang, it's good, man. I think becoming the person that knows what to do, when it comes in your hands, like knowing how you're going to deploy money before it even comes in your hand, that's stewardship.
You have to, man.
Yeah, it's the parable of the talents, where he gave it according to their ability. And then it says the two guys that got one that got 2 and the other got 5, they immediately went and invested it. And I think that's a question I think everyone listening or watching, like, would you immediately invest the money that you get access to? And if not, if your brain's doing something, chances are you're not the person yet.
You have to, because here's what happens. You make your first $100 as an entrepreneur. Most people spend it.
Right.
Not knowing that 30% of that goes to,
right.
to the IRS. So you're already starting at a deficit. And so now that's the habit you've created. Understanding that I'm going to take that $100, put the 30% aside for taxes, and then I'm going to deploy 50% of the 70 to go and make another $200. But see, here's where understanding how to leverage credit comes into play. And I see this for so many entrepreneurs, and it's hard for them because of the discipline. So if I was a brand new entrepreneur, and let's say I helped, someone get $40,000, $50,000. And as a business, you have to advertise, you got to market, you got a brand. And so a starting budget may cost you $3,000 a month. Mm-hmm. As a brand new business, $3,000 a month would bankrupt you and then here's what most people do. Now they're pulling resources from their living expenses. So now their personal life suffers versus just leveraging credit. So again, I've calculated as a mathematical equation. So I know that if my marketing budget is $3,000 a month, I need to run it for at least 90 days. That's $9,000. That $9,000 is going to cost me, let's just say, $100 a month. My average product or my average ticket, let's say, is $250. How many products or things do I have to sell to cover my marketing costs off of the credit card?
Yep.
Oh, only got to sell 2. So let me just get good at that and not focus on having to save up to build for a marketing budget. And so once we start to learn how to reverse engineer and learn how to deploy the credit, now you can take being on a shoestring budget or pulling resources from your personal family. And that's why a lot of the times when I consult couples, that's usually their biggest fight as entrepreneurs, because one spouse has, liquidated the entire savings trying to run this business. But here's the other fundamental issue, Omar, I see with a lot of entrepreneurs. Their first generation, they don't even know what they're doing.
Yep.
So you're taking money for research and development of this thing that you want to make a lot of money from when you don't even understand the fundamental strategies. There's strategy, there's a blueprint to making money in business, and you got to pay for that.
Yep.
Through customer acquisition, through marketing, through branding, which are 2 complete separate different things. So we have to understand these concepts. So going back to your original question, what did I learn from these books? Concepts. These are all concepts.
Last thing I want to run by you.
Absolutely.
So here's what you're getting me to think that, like, even if I have the liquid, even more I should borrow.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So based on when this airs, I'll be moving the studio, and I'm going to be moving into a mini event space, which I'm pumped about. And it will cost me, I'm going to go from like $2,300 a month here. Let's call it $3,000 because of all the stuff, to about $8,000 a month. And like, I have the money to pay that.
Right.
But because I have the money to pay that, would you advise me, or even have me consider, I don't want to like put something on you, but should I consider borrowing money to just pay that lease, just because it keeps the money in the pocket? So
here's how I would look at it. If it were me, I would use a credit card to pay the lease payment. Here's why. One, I know I'm going to make the money back.
Sure.
So the debt is protected. I've hedged the debt. 2, I'm going to be, especially depending on how your life is set up, I'm going to get a bunch of airline points.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to benefit from spending, over $100,000 a year on my rental space. And I've already know how much it's going to make me.
Right.
So of course I deploy my debt, and I use that term purposely, knowing what it's going to make me.
Yep.
So if I have something and that's why I don't ever have a problem leveraging credit to buy real estate, because I always say if things hit the fan, I can sell that property back. If things hit the fan with my business and I'm changing studios, I know I can afford to still pay it out of my money.
Right.
So yeah, so you have to look at it, and that's what I mean by thinking. We take data to make decisions, not, oh, I feel this way. No, I only make decisions off of data. And that's why I never have an emotional tie to a decision when it comes to investing or money.
That's good, bro. I love it. So good. I mean, my brain's turning. I think the wealth journey it's a journey that you must be a student in and never graduate to
Ever.
And then there's just levels to it. Like you say, you can start from the $100,000 houses, then go into apartment buildings, and then commercial, whatever, Right. But dude, I appreciate you. Absolutely. How can people connect with you?
Absolutely. So because one of the biggest issues that most people have when they're starting as a steward on this journey, I always say they don't know their number. And so what I often do is I tell people, if they text the word income, I'm going to send them a comprehensive free budget form where they can track their initial budget so they at least know their number. So you can actually text the word income to 855-449-4888. That's 855-449-4888. Text the word income. And they can follow me at Mr. Will Roundtree across all social media platforms. And man, I'm here to help people, man. I really and I often hear people say sometimes we do have to gatekeep. And I didn't understand what he meant by that at first, but now I do. And you have to, because not everybody is ready for this or whatever it is you have to offer. And so sometimes the gatekeep is just they got to put in some effort.
Right.
And often tell people that they confuse participation with effort. Showing up is not enough. You don't get abs just walking in the gym.
Hey.
You got to put in effort to get those abs. So if you're trying to get on this journey of changing your family's finances and building wealth, you will have to put in effort.
Yep.
So that's where it starts.
Appreciate you, bro. Thanks for being on, man. This is
a
a blessing of a conversation.
Absolutely.